Hello everyone, don't miss out. Watch the full video till the end. Welcome back to the channel where we uncover the untold stories behind reality TV's most shocking scandals. Love knows no boundaries, but sometimes boundaries know no love. This is the story of Jenny Slatten and Sumit Singh, two souls who dared to defy age, culture, and tradition for the sake of love. Their journey began with hope, laughter, and dreams of a shared future. But behind the smiles, there was a storm brewing. A storm of family expectations, cultural traditions, and the painful reality of what it means to fight for love in a world that refuses to accept it. Yes, you heard correctly. Jenny Slatten and her husband, Sumit Singh, had been trapped in family conflict for a long time. Sumit's parents never fully accepted Jenny. They always wanted Sumit to marry a younger Indian woman, start a proper family, have children, and continue the bloodline. After repeatedly hearing this from Sumit's parents, Jenny Slatten became emotionally broken. Jenny wants an independent life. Sumit wants to protect family tradition. Jenny says, "I don't want to live under anyone's control." But Sumit says, "This is our culture. We must take care of our parents." Because of this clash and the constant family drama, they decided to separate. In the end, their 4-year relationship ended due to family pressure. On October 18th, their divorce was finalized in court. And after that, Sumit Singh, hoping to build a new life and considering his parents' wishes, married an Indian woman. Jenny Slatten became mentally devastated. She left India and moved to America forever. This is not just a love story. It is a story of sacrifice, heartbreak, and the painful truth that sometimes love alone is not enough. Jenny Slatten never imagined that her life would take such a dramatic turn. Living in California, she was a woman who had already seen the ups and downs of life. Divorced with grown children, she longed for companionship, someone who would love her for who she was, not for what society expected her to be. On the other side of the world in India, Sumit Singh was a young man in his early 30s. He was adventurous, curious, and open to the idea of connecting with people beyond his culture. When Jenny and Sumit first met online, it was casual, a friendship that blossomed into late-night conversations, laughter, and eventually love. Jenny was captivated by Sumit's warmth. He was different from the men she had known. He listened, he cared, and he made her feel alive again. For Sumit, Jenny was not just a partner. She was a confidant, someone who understood him in ways no one else did. That age difference raised eyebrows, but for them, love was ageless. When Jenny decided to travel to India to meet Sumit, it was a leap of faith. She left behind her familiar world to embrace a culture that was vibrant yet challenging. The streets of Delhi, the aroma of spices, the chaos of traffic. It was overwhelming. But Jenny's heart was focused on one thing, being with Sumit. Their first meeting was magical. Jenny described it as meeting someone she already knew in another life. Sumit held her hand, and in that moment, the world seemed to disappear. They laughed, they explored, and they dreamed of a future together. But love stories are rarely simple. From the very beginning, Sumit knew that his parents would never approve. In Indian tradition, marriage is not just about two individuals. It is about families, generations, and the continuation of bloodlines. Jenny was older, foreign, and unable to give them grandchildren. For Sumit's parents, this was unacceptable. Still, Jenny and Sumit pressed forward. They believed that love could conquer all. They moved in together, shared a home, and tried to build a life despite the whispers of neighbors and the disapproving looks from relatives. Jenny often said, "I don't care what people think. I care about us." But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. The love was strong, but the weight of tradition was stronger. And as their journey unfolded, the battle between love and culture would test them in ways they never imagined. From the very beginning, Jenny and Sumit's love was not just about two people. It was about two worlds colliding. Jenny came from a culture where independence and personal choice was celebrated. In America, she had lived freely, making her own decisions and carving her own path. For her, love was simple. Two people who cared for each other should be enough. But in India, love was never just about two hearts. It was about families, traditions, and the invisible weight of generations. Sumit's parents had raised him with the belief that marriage was not only a union of two individuals but a sacred duty to continue the family line. They dreamed of a daughter-in-law who was young, Indian, and capable of giving them grandchildren. Jenny, with her age and foreign background, represented the opposite of everything they had envisioned. The first time Jenny met Sumit's parents, the tension was palpable. His mother's eyes scanned Jenny from head to toe, her silence louder than words. His father's questions were sharp, almost accusatory. Why would you choose someone so much older? What future can you have with her? Jenny tried to smile, tried to show respect, but inside she felt the sting of rejection. For Sumit, the situation was unbearable. He loved Jenny deeply, but he also loved his parents. In Indian culture, filial duty is not optional. It is expected, demanded, and honored. He found himself caught in a tug-of-war between the woman he adored and the family that had raised him. Jenny often expressed her frustration. "I don't want to live under anyone's control," she told Sumit one evening, her voice trembling. "I came here for love, not to be judged every day." Sumit, torn and exhausted, replied softly, "This is our culture, Jenny. We must take care of our parents. I can't just abandon them." The clash was not just about age or nationality. It was about identity. Jenny wanted freedom, respect, and a life built on love. Sumit wanted harmony, tradition, and the approval of his family. Their home became a battlefield of whispered arguments, silent tears, and endless compromises. Neighbors gossiped, relatives whispered, and the pressure mounted. Jenny felt like an outsider in every room she entered. Sumit felt like a traitor every time he defended her. The love that had once been their shield now became their burden. And yet, despite the pain, they held on. Jenny believed that if she proved her loyalty, the family would eventually accept her. Sumit believed that if he balanced both worlds carefully, he could keep everyone happy. But deep down, both knew that the storm was only beginning and the hardest battles were yet to come. Jenny Slatton had always believed that love could bridge any gap, age, culture, or distance. But as the days turned into months in India, she realized that acceptance was not something easily won. Every step she took seemed to remind her that she was an outsider in a world that valued tradition above individuality. In their small home, Jenny tried to adapt. She learned to cook Indian dishes, practiced Hindi phrases, and even dressed in traditional kurtis to show respect. She wanted Sumit's family to see that her love for him was genuine and that she was willing to embrace his culture. She wanted Sumit's family to see that her love for him was genuine and that she was willing to embrace his culture. But no matter how hard she tried, the wall between her and Sumit's parents only seemed to grow taller. Every smile she offered felt forced, every kind gesture went unnoticed, and every attempt to belong ended in quiet rejection. Jenny began to realize that acceptance was not something she could earn through patience alone. It was something that had already been decided against her long before she ever stepped into their home. Each morning she woke up hoping the atmosphere would feel lighter, hoping that maybe this time things would be different. But the tension in the air remained heavy and unchanging. Conversations felt guarded. Smiles felt artificial. Even simple moments like sharing a meal carried an invisible weight. Jenny wasn't just living in a house filled with people who disapproved of her. She was living in a constant state of emotional uncertainty where every word, every action, and every decision felt like it was being judged. Sumit found himself trapped in a silent war that had no winners. He loved Jenny deeply, but he also felt bound by the expectations of his parents and the traditions he had grown up with. Every time he tried to stand up for Jenny, guilt followed him. Every time he sided with his parents, Jenny's heartbreak became impossible to ignore. He was walking a tightrope with no safe landing on either side. What started as a love story that once felt bold and fearless slowly turned into a fragile arrangement filled with compromise and emotional exhaustion. Jenny began to feel like she was constantly asking for permission to exist in her own marriage. She had left behind everything familiar to build a life with Sumit, yet she now found herself feeling more alone than she ever had before. The arguments between them didn't always come in loud bursts. Often they came quietly, in late-night conversations filled with heavy silence and unspoken frustration. Jenny would ask simple questions about their future. Where would they live? Would they ever have a place of their own? Could they build a life that belonged to them instead of constantly living under the shadow of family expectations? Sumit rarely had clear answers. He would reassure her that he loved her, that he wanted to make things work, but his promises felt increasingly uncertain. Jenny didn't want grand gestures. She wanted stability. She wanted respect. Most of all, she wanted a life where she didn't feel like an outsider in her own home. As the months passed, the emotional strain became impossible to ignore. Jenny started noticing how much she had changed since moving to India. The confident, independent woman who once made bold decisions now felt cautious and worn down. She began to question whether love alone was enough to sustain a relationship surrounded by constant conflict. Sumit, meanwhile, felt the pressure from his family intensify. Conversations about duty, responsibility, and the future grew more frequent. His parents reminded him of the expectations placed upon him as their son. They spoke about legacy, about grandchildren, about the life they had always imagined for him. Each reminder carried an unspoken message that his current path was not acceptable. Jenny tried to stay strong, but the emotional toll was undeniable. She missed the comfort of her old life. She missed feeling secure. She missed waking up without the constant weight of tension pressing down on her. At times she wondered if she had made the biggest mistake of her life by leaving everything behind for a relationship that now felt so uncertain. Yet despite the pain, she still loved Sumit. That love made every decision harder. Walking away would mean letting go of the person she had sacrificed so much for. Staying meant continuing a life that was slowly draining her emotionally. Their home, once a place of hope and shared dreams, began to feel like a space filled with quiet battles. Small disagreements carried deeper meanings. Simple conversations turned into emotional negotiations. Jenny wanted independence. Sumit wanted harmony. Those two desires began to feel impossible to reconcile. The more Jenny asked for space and autonomy, the more Sumit felt torn between protecting his marriage and honoring his family's expectations. Neither of them intended to hurt the other, yet the situation they were trapped in seemed designed to do exactly that. Eventually, the strain reached a point where difficult conversations could no longer be avoided. Jenny expressed her need for a life that felt like her own. She wanted a home where she could feel respected and valued. She wanted a future that wasn't dictated by constant approval from others. Sumit listened, but his silence often spoke louder than his words. He understood her pain, yet he struggled to imagine a path forward that wouldn't lead to conflict with his parents. The realization slowly settled in for both of them that love, no matter how genuine, could not erase the cultural and familial pressures surrounding their relationship. Rumors and speculation began circulating among fans and those who followed their journey closely. People started questioning whether Jenny and Sumit could truly overcome the challenges they faced. Some believed their bond was strong enough to survive anything. Others felt that the constant pressure would eventually push them apart. Behind the scenes, the emotional distance between them continued to grow. What once felt like an unbreakable connection now felt fragile and uncertain. Jenny began considering what life would look like if she chose herself for the first time in years. The thought was both terrifying and strangely liberating. For Sumit, the situation felt equally overwhelming. He had spent years trying to balance his love for Jenny with his loyalty to his family. Now it seemed that balance was slipping beyond his control. Every choice carried consequences. Every decision risked hurting someone he cared about. The future he once imagined with Jenny now felt clouded by doubt and unresolved conflict. The love they shared had not disappeared, but it was being tested in ways neither of them had ever anticipated. As time went on, one painful truth became impossible to ignore. Sometimes love alone is not enough to overcome the weight of tradition, expectation, and deeply rooted cultural differences. Jenny and Sumit's journey, once filled with hope and determination, now stood at a crossroads that would define the rest of their lives. And as the world watched closely, the question remained whether their story would find a way forward or come to an emotional end that neither of them had ever truly wanted. And as the world watched closely, the question remained whether their story would find a way forward or come to an emotional end that neither of them had ever truly wanted. The silence between them started lasting longer than the arguments. That kind of silence is dangerous. It is not loud, not dramatic, not explosive. It is quiet acceptance slowly forming. Jenny began noticing that Sumit no longer fought as hard during disagreements. He no longer made bold promises about moving out or building a separate future. Instead, his answers became careful, measured, and distant. It was as if he had already started preparing himself for an outcome he was afraid to say out loud. Jenny felt it first in her heart before she admitted it to herself. The energy had changed. The urgency to protect their marriage was fading. When love turns into negotiation, something fragile begins to crack. She started asking herself a question she had avoided for years. If he cannot fully choose me, then what am I holding on to? That question echoed in her mind during long nights when sleep would not come. She thought about her children back in America. She thought about the comfort she once had. She thought about how much of herself she had reshaped to fit into a life that still did not fully accept her. Meanwhile, Sumit faced increasing pressure at home. Conversations about his future became more serious. His parents were no longer hiding their disappointment. They spoke openly about wanting stability, about wanting grandchildren, about wanting their son to return to what they believed was the right path. Each discussion felt like another weight added to his shoulders. He cared about Jenny, but he also feared permanently damaging his relationship with his parents. The emotional tug-of-war had reached its breaking point. There were moments when Jenny tried one last time to reignite the spark that had brought them together in the first place. She reminded him of their early days, the laughter, the promises, the risks they had taken for each other. She wanted to see the same determination in his eyes. Sometimes she did, but it was quickly replaced by uncertainty. And uncertainty is not something a marriage can survive for long. Then came the shift that felt final. Instead of arguing about how to fix things, they began discussing what separation might look like. Not in anger, not in chaos, but in exhausted honesty. That kind of conversation is heartbreaking because it means both people understand the reality but are too tired to keep fighting it. Jenny expressed how emotionally drained she felt. Sumit admitted that he felt torn beyond repair. For the first time, neither of them tried to pretend everything would magically improve. The idea of divorce, once unthinkable after everything they had endured, slowly became a possibility neither could ignore. It was not about betrayal. It was not about hatred. It was about survival. Jenny needed peace. Sumit needed relief from constant conflict. The love was still there, but love without security can feel like standing on unstable ground. Eventually, discussions turned into decisions. Decisions turned into action. And action led to a separation that many had feared but hoped would never come. When news began circulating that their marriage had officially ended, fans were stunned but not entirely surprised. The signs had been there for years. The cultural divide, the family pressure, the emotional exhaustion. It had all been building toward this moment. Reports suggested that after the separation, Sumit began focusing on rebuilding his life in a way that aligned more closely with his family's expectations. Whether that meant considering remarriage or simply reconnecting with traditional values, the shift was clear. For Jenny, the aftermath was deeply personal. Leaving India was not just a physical move. It was an emotional surrender. She had invested years of her life into a dream that ultimately could not survive the weight of reality. Returning to America meant starting over again. It meant facing questions from friends and family. It meant confronting the pain of what could have been. But it also meant reclaiming her independence. For the first time in a long while, she was no longer living under constant scrutiny. She could breathe again. Sumit, too, faced his own emotional consequences. Choosing stability with his family did not erase the memories he had built with Jenny. He had shared years of his life with her. He had defied expectations for her. Walking away did not mean he stopped caring. It meant he reached a point where the conflict became unsustainable. In many ways, both of them lost something. Both of them sacrificed something. And both of them had to confront the painful truth that love sometimes collides with forces too strong to overcome. Their story became more than just reality television drama. It became a reflection of how deeply culture, family, and personal identity can shape relationships. It showed how two people can love each other genuinely and still be unable to create a life that satisfies both worlds. Jenny returned to America carrying heartbreak but also resilience. Sumit remained in India carrying relief but also the weight of what he had given up. In the end, this was never a simple story of good versus bad. It was a story of choices, of loyalty, of expectation, of sacrifice. And as both Jenny and Sumit move forward separately, one question continues to linger among those who followed their journey from the beginning. If they had been born in the same country, under the same traditions, without the constant pressure of family approval, would their love have survived? Or was this ending always written between the lines of two worlds that were never meant to fully merge? Or was this ending always written between the lines of two worlds that were never meant to fully merge? As the dust slowly settled after their separation, both Jenny and Sumit were left facing a reality that felt almost unreal compared to the dreams they once shared. For years, their story had been about fighting against the odds, fighting against judgment, fighting against distance, fighting against expectations. But now there was nothing left to fight, only the quiet aftermath of choices that had finally been made. Jenny's return to America marked the beginning of a new chapter, but it was not an easy one. Starting over after investing so much emotionally can feel like trying to rebuild a life from scattered pieces. Friends who cared about her welcomed her back with warmth and concern, but even their support could not fully erase the pain she carried. She had not just left a relationship behind. She had left a life she had built day by day, sacrifice by sacrifice. Every memory of India carried both love and heartbreak. The street she once explored with excitement now existed only in her past. The home she had shared with Sumit was no longer hers. Yet within that heartbreak was also a quiet strength. Jenny had always been resilient. She had faced divorce before, raised children, and navigated life's unpredictable turns. This time was no different, though the emotional stakes felt heavier. She began focusing on healing, reconnecting with her own identity, and rediscovering the independence she once cherished. The journey back to herself would take time, but it had already begun the moment she chose peace over constant emotional struggle. Sumit, on the other side of the world, found himself adjusting to a different kind of reality. The pressure that once surrounded him had eased, but relief did not come without reflection. He had spent years balancing two powerful forces in his life, love and duty. Now that one chapter had closed, he had to face what remained. Rebuilding a sense of normalcy meant reconnecting with family, reassessing his future, and coming to terms with the emotional cost of his decisions. For many observers, the most talked about aspect of the aftermath was the possibility of Sumit moving forward in a way that aligned with his parents' wishes. Conversations about a more traditional future began to surface. Whether through family introductions or discussions about remarriage, the expectation that he would eventually settle into a life that satisfied his parents remained strong. These developments sparked intense reactions among fans who had followed his journey with Jenny for so long. Some felt he had chosen obligation over love. Others believed he had simply reached a point where he needed stability. What made their story so compelling was that there were no clear villains. Jenny was not wrong for wanting independence and respect. Sumit was not wrong for feeling bound to his family's expectations. Their conflict was rooted in differences that neither of them could fully change. Culture is powerful. Family bonds are powerful. And sometimes those forces shape outcomes in ways that love alone cannot overcome. As time passed, both Jenny and Sumit began focusing on personal growth. Jenny explored opportunities to reconnect with her passions, spend time with loved ones, and rebuild her sense of normalcy. She gradually found comfort in familiar surroundings, discovering that starting over did not mean losing everything. It meant creating space for new experiences and healing. Sumit, meanwhile, worked toward restoring balance in his own life. He spent more time with his family, reconsidered his priorities, and tried to move forward with a sense of clarity about what he wanted for his future. The public fascination with their story never fully faded. Fans continued discussing what could have been and what ultimately went wrong. Some revisited old episodes, analyzing moments that now seemed like early signs of the outcome. Others expressed hope that both individuals would eventually find happiness in separate paths. Their journey had become one of the most memorable narratives within reality television, not because it was filled with dramatic twists alone, but because it reflected real emotional struggles that many people could relate to. In the end, Jenny and Sumit's relationship left behind a lasting impression about the complexity of love across cultures. It highlighted the importance of communication, mutual understanding, and the challenges that arise when personal desires collide with deeply rooted traditions. Their story served as a reminder that relationships are not just about feelings. They are also shaped by environment, expectations, and the willingness of both partners to stand united in the face of pressure. While their romantic chapter may have closed, the impact of their journey continues to resonate. Jenny moves forward with lessons learned and a renewed sense of self. Sumit continues building a life shaped by his choices and responsibilities. Both carry memories of a love that once felt powerful enough to overcome anything. And for those who followed their story from the very beginning, one truth remains undeniable. Sometimes love changes us forever, even when it does not last forever. Sometimes love changes us forever, even when it does not last forever. And for Jenny and Sumit, the emotional aftermath of their separation continued long after the official ending of their relationship. When a love story becomes public, the ending does not simply belong to the two people involved. It becomes a topic of discussion, debate, and speculation among millions who followed every step of the journey. Fans who once rooted for them to overcome all odds now found themselves processing a reality they had hoped would never come. In the weeks that followed their separation, conversations about what truly happened behind closed doors began spreading across fan communities. Some believed that the pressure from Sumit's family had finally reached a point where continuing the marriage became impossible. Others suggested that years of emotional strain had slowly weakened the foundation of their relationship. Regardless of the different opinions, one thing remained clear. Their story had reached a turning point that could not be undone. Jenny's transition back to life in America was filled with mixed emotions. On one hand, she felt relief. Relief from the constant tension, from the feeling of being evaluated, from the exhausting need to prove her place in a household where she never felt fully accepted. On the other hand, she carried the weight of what she had lost. She had not just walked away from a partner. She had walked away from a vision of the future she had spent years building in her mind. Adjusting to a quieter life required patience and emotional strength. She began focusing on rebuilding her personal sense of happiness. Spending time with her children brought comfort. Reconnecting with old friends reminded her of the life she had once lived independently. Slowly, she started rediscovering simple joys that had been overshadowed by years of stress and uncertainty. Though the heartbreak lingered, so did a sense of liberation. She was no longer living under constant pressure to adapt or conform. She could finally live on her own terms again. Meanwhile, in India, Sumit faced a different kind of adjustment. With the relationship behind him, he found himself stepping back into a life shaped more directly by his family's expectations. The emotional conflict that had defined his daily routine for years had subsided, but the memories remained. Ending a relationship does not erase the emotional investment that once existed. It simply changes the direction of one's path forward. As discussions about his future continued, speculation grew about whether he would pursue a more traditional marriage aligned with his parents' wishes. In many ways, the expectations that had once caused tension now became part of his new reality. Family gatherings, conversations about stability, and plans for the future all reflected a shift toward a life more rooted in cultural tradition. Whether this brought him peace or simply a different kind of responsibility remained a question only he could answer. The story of Jenny and Sumit continued to resonate with audiences because it represented more than just reality television drama. It highlighted the real challenges faced by couples navigating cultural differences and family expectations. It showed how love can be genuine and powerful, yet still struggle against forces that shape personal identity and responsibility. Their journey became a reflection of how complex relationships can become when two worlds collide. Fans across the globe continued sharing their thoughts and emotions. Some expressed sadness over the ending of a relationship they had supported for years. Others expressed understanding, recognizing the immense pressure both individuals had faced. Many simply hoped that both Jenny and Sumit would eventually find happiness in whatever paths they chose moving forward. As time moved on, both individuals began embracing the idea of new beginnings. Jenny focused on healing and rediscovering herself. Sumit focused on stability and aligning his life with the expectations that had always surrounded him. Their shared chapter had closed, but the impact of their journey remained deeply felt by those who had followed their story from the beginning. And perhaps that is what makes their story unforgettable. It was never just about romance. It was about courage, sacrifice, identity, and the difficult choices that come when love meets reality. Jenny and Sumit once believed their connection could overcome any obstacle. In many ways, their love did achieve something powerful. It brought two very different worlds together, even if only for a limited time. Now, as both continue forward on separate paths, their story stands as a reminder that love can shape our lives in profound ways, even when it does not last forever. Sometimes the greatest impact of a relationship is not the ending we hoped for, but the growth and understanding we carry with us long after it ends. And for Jenny and Sumit, that emotional legacy will remain long after the cameras stop rolling and the headlines fade away.